Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Tuesday, August 27th, and we've been gone for a little bit. I guess we haven't been gone for all that long, but it feels like it's been a while with all the news that has come out. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, how are we doing today?
We're doing well. It's been a newsy couple days, and it seems like we're coming back to a totally different, a ripping hot Toronto Blue Jays team. And there's much to get to on the pitching front, on the hitting front, and everywhere in between. And we will dive into that today.
Yeah, they're on a 5 or 6 game losing streak, depending on how you want to look at it, based on the doubleheader yesterday.
Well, they're hot. Yeah, they're winning. They're winning ball games.
Yeah, they swept the Angels. They took 2 from the Red Sox yesterday, or 1. I don't know how we're going to talk about this wild suspended game that technically took place on June 26th, but was played yesterday. And of course, Danny Jansen making history. What was your favorite stat or favorite little tidbit that came out from the game?
Well, I was excited for the possibility of Will Wagner or Leo Jimenez picking up their first big league hit after they debut, or maybe before they debut. I don't know. It was all a little bit strange and confusing. The other thing is I saw a tweet over the afternoon kind of being like, MLB really got us to watch a 2 o'clock Jays Red Sox game like it was going to be the moon landing. Because Danny Jansen was going to be behind the plate to start the game. I don't know. It was fun. I wouldn't necessarily call it that exciting. Danny Jansen had his Blue Jays picture up on the Jumbotron for a minute. That was fun, I guess. But other than a couple of coding errors that are showing up on Fangraphs and Baseball Reference, that one pretty much went without anything too notable, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean it's a fun little story about it's very thing that can pretty much only happen in baseball, which is kind of fun, but I mean at the same time it's kind of like, well, it is what it is. It's not breaking news. It's just a fun little thing that happened. And I mean, kind of like you look at some of the things, like Eric Swanson pitched in Buffalo on June 26th. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, when he had his 13-game hit streak, I tweeted this one out. He had his hit streak cut down to 10 games because he didn't get a hit in this game, but he was still technically in the lineup. So his 3 hits in the games after that didn't count towards his hit streak. So that had readjusted. Like you mentioned, the coding errors. Ryan Yarbrough was still a Dodger on June 26th, and Fangraphs hasn't quite caught up to adding yesterday's performance to his page. So yeah, like a ton of stuff to kind of come out from it, and it's a fun little thing, but it's not the most breaking of stories.
It will make a very good trivia question in 2029's edition of Do You Know These Toronto Blue Jays Fun Facts?
Yes. How long was Isaiah Kiner-Falefa's longest hit streak as a Blue Jay?
13. Incorrect. 10 games.
I feel like you could get some points for saying 13, because if anybody remembers that would be quite notable. IKF not playing very well with the Pirates.
Yes. But I mean, nevertheless, the guys that were here were playing pretty well yesterday, and it is like a hot streak we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, they sweep the Angels in that series. They have like a couple really, really good moments. They have the walk-off win where they're going into the 9th down 1, and Joey Loperfido hits a game-tying home run, and then Addison Barger hits the walk-off, and then of course Bowden Francis has his near no-hitter. Let's start with some of the young guys. I mean, like everybody has kind of been hitting on the Blue Jays recently. Like the last couple weeks, they've been probably the best offense in baseball, but like the young guys are obviously kind of the story, because they're the ones that have, in theory, potentially the largest impact on what this team can look like next year. Who has been the most exciting development for you out of Spencer Horwitz, Addison Barger looking good recently, Joey Loperfido kind of finding his feet? Who's been the main story for you?
I think it's definitely Loperfido, 100%, because you think about how he started as a Blue Jay and the struggles, and then we heard about some mechanical changes, and he's been nothing short of raking since, I believe it's basically August 11th or August 12th. And of the guys acquired at the deadline, he's kind of the guy maybe with the most prospect pedigree. I mean, obviously, Jake Bloss also in that trade was considered a top 100 prospect by a couple of outlets. But Loperfido definitely had the most name recognition out of anybody that the Blue Jays acquired at the trade deadline. So for him to seemingly be figuring something out, he's cut the K's way down. The power is starting to emerge. He's pulling the ball now. That to me indicates that something has been tapped into, something has been figured out, especially on the strikeouts front, because he's having a lot of trouble with, commanding the zone and a lot of trouble with avoiding the swing and miss. And now for him to be having success and having that success with his strikeouts coming down indicates to me that he's a guy that is going to be a part of their future plans. Because don't forget, 2 weeks ago, we were like, oh, maybe this is a guy that the Astros gave up on for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, he made the mechanical change. He's probably the most tools up player that they got in that trade, right? Like, I mean, he's got the speed, he's got the power, he's got the arm, he's got he probably doesn't have like the hit tool that you'd want for a five tool guy, but yeah, he's certainly, got the exciting attributes that you want to look at in a player. And I mean, whether that turns into a productive major leaguer, like we're yet to see. I think both of us are pretty high on Joey Loperfido. And I think a lot of people are very high on Joey Loperfido because he's a really exciting prospect and he's kind of got the tools that you want on your team. And it's really nice to see him perform during the stretch. Like he's made a couple good plays defensively. He's legging out some triples. He's hitting homers. He's really just kind of really figured it out. And whether he's going to be able to continue that is kind of what we're going to watch for the next little while here. And obviously they are on this little hot streak while playing not the best major league competition. I mean, the 7 wins in 7 games against the Angels is nice, but man, like watching those games, like the Angels are bad. Like that is, I couldn't imagine being an Angels fan. Like I know the White Sox are on pace to be like the worst baseball team ever, but I think the fan base that you would least want to be a part of right now might be the Angels because of everything that they've gone through, having stars, the best players, MVPs, and not being able to make the playoffs. And then now where you're just like they have no future, they have no prospects, they have no, really exciting players on the way. And whenever they do, they just draft like some old guy in the draft and then they push him to the majors in the same year. Like it's just not a lot of excitement in Anaheim right now.
No, I'd say that's probably an understatement. That is not a team that is probably very fun to be watching. And I think it also put into perspective that A, the Blue Jays are not going to be in the Ethan Holiday sweepstakes, unfortunately. I mean, barring some lottery luck. And two, this is not the Blue Jays team that we were supposed to be watching. They are clearly not one of those bottom tier awful baseball teams, but through a variety of factors, that's how the dice have seemingly rolled for these Blue Jays. But this is not a 90 loss Blue Jays team. This is a team with talent that underperformed. And right now they're overperforming. But to me, still the fact that this is something they have in their wheelhouse speaks to a certain level of confidence, a certain level of delusion for the 2025 Blue Jays.
I have a so with the young guys, right? So like I mean, we're looking at it and the young guys that you are trying to fit onto this roster next season. I mean, you don't want to go into 2025 with this roster as your opening day roster, right? Like they need to add probably 2 hitters, a couple bullpen pieces, and maybe a rotation piece. Which of these young guys that are on the major league roster right now, and I mean, certainly there could be some minor league guys that play their way into that consideration, an Alan Roden type or somebody along those lines, but who of the group right now do you think that you would lock into the 2025 roster and who would you be looking at potentially trading?
Honestly, I don't think that there's an answer to that because I don't think there's anybody. I think there's still so much runway. You know, Davis Schneider was one of the best stories of the 2023 season and started 2024 as one of the Blue Jays' best hitters. And now looks like he's going to end up as a probably bench or maybe even org depth kind of guy in 2025. And, I gave my flowers to Loperfido, and, Will Wagner's had a lot of success. Spencer Horwitz has been one of the best rookies in all of the American League, mind you, in a weak class. Like, there's stuff to like. This is a team that has found a couple of bodies that seem to be capable major league players and fringy starters with room for growth. Nobody, in my estimation, has a spot on the 2025 Blue Jays locked up, except for maybe Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Dalton Varsho, and then by the nature of contracts, and I'm specifically speaking about on the offensive side of the ball, maybe a Springer. And then if you want to toss Kirk in there, he seems to have found something. You could potentially say him. But beyond that group, I'm not really sure who else I could confidently say will be on the 2025 Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, I mean that's a conversation that we can have going forward. It'll be very interesting. I mean, I just have their numbers up here for like how they're performing over the last 2 weeks, and every single player on the roster has a WRC plus above 100, except for Will Wagner, Stuart Baroa, Brian Servin, and Davis Schneider. And Davis Schneider's is a minus 37.
Yeah, that's not ideal. Like, this is a guy that's got to figure something out, and maybe he needs to figure it out in the minor leagues. Maybe it's just a case of they got nothing to lose. He's just got to get some reps, and he's got to figure it out against major league pitching. But he's a guy that I think could have been could have been in the plans, but that might not be the case anymore.
Yeah, he's really interesting, and I mean, I don't want to go too hard because like it's been a tough season for him after he kind of had like the nice beginning to the year. He gets a walk-off homer off Josh Hader and like kind of establishes himself. He was their leadoff hitter for a few weeks, and kind of ever since then it's just been like a really tough season for him. But would you send him down like when rosters expand in 4 days here? Like, do you think that you bring up two guys and you send him down?
I'm just wondering who it would even be that you would bring up to replace him. Because if you send him down, in theory, that creates a third roster spot. So you figure Jake Bloss gets one of the call ups. I mean, is the plan to add an additional arm? I mean, there's been a variety of guys that have shuttled back and forth between AAA and the major leagues for the Blue Jays. Is it just a case of adding Bloss plus two more bullpen arms?
I mean, you
Do
could
you really
go you
feel the
could go
need?
Bloss, another bullpen arm. Can you do that? Can you have 15 pitchers on the roster? I'm not sure
I don't.
if there's a
Well, with
max.
roster
But
expansion,
then
I wonder.
Nathan Lucas, like I feel like that's a guy who you could probably bring up.
Probably, but I mean, I'm not really sure what bringing him up accomplishes, given that he's not a prospect. You're not seeing what you got with him. That's a body. That's a guy that's getting a crack at the big leagues because he was hurt earlier in the year.
I mean, he's probably earned it though, right? Like, I mean, he's a guy who he would have been up already if he didn't have the broken thumb, or sorry, the torn ligament in his thumb. And like, I mean, it's been like he's been performing really well in AAA. So I don't know like if that's a guy that maybe you just want to like throw a bone to and be like, hey, you've been like a really good soldier for us. So like let's bring you up and kind of see if there is something there. Like I think we were talking at the beginning of the year, like that's the type of guy who probably would be starting for like the Chicago White Sox or the Miami Marlins, right?
Listen,
Like,
listen, you can do that. He's got an OPS over the last 2 years. I mean, he had a 953 last year in AAA, and this year he's got an 872 OPS. So he has been hitting well. Like, there's no really kind of other way to articulate things. But Nathan Lucas, his birthday is July 12th. He turned 30 a month ago. like this is not a guy that has any chance of being on the Blue Jays in 3 years. Never mind, even 2 years is probably even a stretch.
Yeah.
So, like, could he be a fourth outfielder? Plausibly, but there's not a lot to find out about a guy that's already turned 30.
Yeah. Unfortunate for him because like the I think the injury really did hurt him as far as like getting time in the major leagues because we've seen Luis De Los Santos, we've seen Stuart Baroa, we've seen Aroldis Martinez, we've seen like all these guys get major league time this year, and I think he would have probably taken up a lot of that time if he was healthy.
Yeah, you figure he would have factored in,
Yeah.
but it's just the nature of the beast, right?
It's also interesting. I mean, talking about rosters expanding, like I mean, Bo Bichette's going to be coming back eventually. It sounds like they are planning on having Jordan Romano back with the major league team at some point this season, which I think might be a little bit dramatic since there's 5 weeks left, if that. And he's just starting to throw for the first time since his surgery. Like it seems like him being back on a major league mound in 2024 is a pipe dream. I think even getting him back on like a minor league mound, like I would maybe just have him, work his way back and kind of get some backfield work or something like that. I don't know. It just seems like I thought I was pretty shocked when that report came out the other day that they were planning on having him back at some point this season. And then Aurelvis Martinez, his suspension, of course, will come up, and we'll see how they deal with that. If he'll be back with the big league team or if he will be on his way back to Buffalo.
I mean, again, this is just more of the same of kind of shuttling guys up and down. Bo Bichette sounds like he's almost like imminently
Yeah.
going to be returning. He's either with the club now or will be with them in the coming days. Kind of sounds like he'll be back possibly within a week or two. But again, it's almost the same with him and Romano, where I don't know what bringing him back this year accomplishes other than giving him a couple of big league at bats, right? Like
I
what is
I want to get your
having him?
thoughts. I want to get your thoughts on this. So the Bo Bichette hate has got to be at an all-time high right now.
Oh, for sure.
Like he has been traded a million times. People are done with Bo Bichette right now because of his attitude or his performance or whatever. Like, I mean, a combination of probably all these things combined, right? And I'm curious to get your thoughts on like the Bo Bichette hate has like probably gone a little bit too far because he's been injured, and it seems like what are your thoughts just overall on like Bo Bichette as like his attitude and the performance and like where you're at on Bo Bichette?
I'm out on him. I mean, I'm not necessarily gonna call myself a Bo Bichette hater, although as I've repeated numerous times on this podcast, it feels like we were watching the Chris Bryantification of him. But I'm pretty much out on him as a part of this team's future because A, his performance over the last calendar year has been very poor, and B, he has expressed little to no interest in being part of this team's plans moving forward. And the urgency now is to extend Guerrero. And I don't really see a universe where extending Bichette happens because he's almost had the Guerrero thing happen where he's going to ask for a ton of money. And how comfortable are you committing to Bo Bichette at that term at that dollar?
I I think he obviously he's not going to sign a contract before next offseason. Like there's no way with the way that this season has gone for him, like whether it's with Toronto or somewhere else, he is not signing an extension. Like there is too much for him to prove still. Um, and like who knows what you would even pay him as an organization right now. Like that, I don't think that there's any sense of what his value would be if you were to extend him right now. I think you wouldn't be comfortable with giving him 20 million. You wouldn't probably wouldn't be comfortable with giving him 15 million a year. There's just a lot up in the air there, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I think him coming back is actually really important, not only for him but also for the Blue Jays, is for him to kind of get in the mix here. And obviously, like, I mean, he's been around the team and stuff, so it's not like he's not familiar with these players and stuff like that. But I think it's going to be important for him to at least return to the field, and I don't know how the performance will go because I don't know if he's going to be all the way back healthy. And it seems like he's maybe been a little bit unhealthy like all season ever since kind of that IL stint last year. And I think it's just important to get him back on the field and see if he can kind of recoup some of that value himself right now. And like if he came back and over the last 2 weeks hit like 350 whatever and like had a really nice end to the year, like that helps you as a Blue Jays if it really is going to be his last few weeks with the Blue Jays. If you are planning on trading him in the offseason, if he comes back and performs well, that probably only reinforces some trade value there. And if he doesn't perform well, I don't think that it hurts his trade value all that much because he hasn't performed that well this season
Well,
anyways.
it's not so much that it hurts his trade value per se, as much as, to me, are you gaining anything by trading him as it is, right? Like, to me, if he has a successful end to the season, I'm walking into 2025 with him as a Blue Jay. And I know that that's going to cause all kinds of nonsense in terms of the noise. And I'm sure it'll cause problems maybe in terms of, does he want to stay? There'll be a million questions of him and his commitment to the Blue Jays. But I think that, to me, this period of rebuilding value is best served in April and May of next year than it is September of this year. Because to me, I'd rather him spend the entirety of the off season and even get an early off season, getting healthy, getting better, and then comes back for spring training. He's in good shape, and from there, that's where you let it ride and you go to him. We're either going to trade you after a successful start to the season, or you're going to be a part of this team's plans if we're making a playoff push. Because the difference between Bichette's trade value as a poor hitter after this season with a full year versus his career numbers maybe at the deadline, I just don't know how big the difference in value is there. And to me, you might even get more for him if the hitting comes back and you decide to trade him after a strong first half. I
Yeah.
mean, look at what they got for Isaiah Kiner for left.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if he is an all-star next year but I mean, if he's an all-star next year as a Blue Jay, I assume that the Blue Jays are probably in some kind of playoff contention,
Well,
right?
that's the other thing, right? Is that his performance is going to be directly correlated to the Blue Jays' success.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, honestly, like I get that like you don't want to lose assets for nothing. And especially a Bo Bichette level asset, like it's a really tough conversation. And like, are you fine running him into the offseason? Because I feel like the odds are likely that no matter if you win or lose, that he will not be a Blue Jay in 2026 if you take him into the offseason.
No, that seems likely. And I think that's just a reality that they kind of have to accept. I do think that they will be able to get a decent return for him at the deadline if they choose to go that route. But I don't think that you need to make the decision yet because I think they've got time on their side.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like the worst case scenario is you keep him on your team and he performs poorly next year and you trade him at the deadline. I think that's probably worst case scenario. Like best case scenario is he comes back, stars, and you win the World Series with him, right? And
Pretty
then
much.
if he leaves, then you know banners fly forever, right? So flags fly forever. So it's an interesting conversation. I mean, it's kind of not what we planned on talking about today, but I think Bo Bichette coming back, I think it will be interesting to see what he can kind of do over the last month of the year, and if he can kind of reestablish himself as like a franchise cornerstone piece or as like a intriguing player for another team or for the Blue Jays in 2025.
Yeah, to me, there's no situation where him coming back this year changes the outlook of his basically prognosis for next year.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's go back to the current team because We talked a little bit about Loperfido and kind of some of these other guys, but I mean, Addison Barger has been really good recently. Like he's kind of hitting for power. What are you seeing from him, and how do you think that does that change your opinion on him going into 2025? Like, is he a guy that you can see on the roster next season based on what he's done recently?
Well, here's one thing he's got going for him that a lot of these other guys don't, is that he plays third base. And the Blue Jays this offseason, their biggest need, I would say, is finding a third baseman that is capable of being an impact player. Is that going to be a big money spending guy like Alex Bregman? I mean, he's not the same Alex Bregman that he was a couple of years back, but that's a name that I'm sure will be linked to the Blue Jays given their success getting George Springer a couple of years back. Are there other options at third base? It's very clearly, at least in my estimation, the number one question mark that is definitive with this team, because they got a million outfielders, and sure, a lot of them are young and inexperienced, and Barger is realistically one of them. He does play right field, but they have so much in the way of outfielders that his best path to being an impact part of the Blue Jays is being a guy that can play the hot corner and play it really well. And the fact that he's a left-handed hitter also helps his case. So to me, I kind of like what I'm seeing from him now, but he's going to have to sustain this because it's been a short sample. And this is not the same Addison Barger that we saw earlier in the season. Now, that's a good thing that he has, it seems like, acclimated and adjusted and has found a bit of a groove. And you talked about the light tower power he's shown. The exit velo numbers are right up there with, the best of the best in the organization in AAA. So this is a guy that should factor in the Blue Jays' plans next year and could feasibly do so as a third baseman. But he's going to have to keep doing this if he wants more certainty that he's going to be their everyday third baseman next year. And I'm not sure that the Blue Jays have any scenario where he is that guy anyways.
Yeah, I don't think I think if he won September Player of the Month and like hit 10 home runs, I still don't think I would feel comfortable penciling or locking him into the third base job next year. Just based on like the type of player that he is, right? Like, I mean, he's kind of a little bit all or nothing, and we've seen a lot of nothing, and we're kind of starting to see the all right now, where he's kind of, hit the walk-off home run's a really cool moment. It seems like almost all of his hits are going for extra bases, which is great, but I think that we've kind of seen like an all or nothing guy, like a Matt Chapman type at third base, where at least the defense kind of sustains him when the bat is bringing you nothing. And for Addison Barger, I don't think that he is going to ever be at that level of defensive ability at third base. I just don't think that he's going to bring that. I mean, right now he's got zero DRS, -4 outs above average at third base. So yeah, I think that's a spot that they really are going to want to fill next year. And when you look at like kind of what they have right now, I mean, Ernie Clement's been playing a great third base, um, and he's probably a guy that you feel comfortable bringing back as like a utility infielder next year that can slot in well at different spots and be a nice bat to ball guy off the bench. I find it hard to find a spot for Addison Barger, and I really like Addison Barger as a player. I think he's going to end up being a really solid major leaguer. I just don't know where there's going to be room for him on the 2025 Blue Jays if they are trying to contend for the postseason.
I just wonder what else could be a solution if we're talking about who the Blue Jays are going to go out and get to play third base, right? Like maybe it's Willy Adames. Like I don't know
I'm like pretty anti the idea of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. becoming a full-time third baseman, but I mean that is an option.
I think it's one of my last options. I think you're swinging for Alex Bregman before, and that's to say that again, this is not the same Alex Bregman that we've seen. I don't have his numbers up in front of me, but I can tell you, I know that he is not the same, power hitting, great guy that he was 5 years ago or so. I just have his numbers up now. He's got a 115 OPS plus this year with 20 bombs. Like he's getting on base a good clip, but the
he's really turned it on. Like he had a really slow start, and I think with him, your concern would be you take him out of Minute Maid, and he doesn't have the Crawford boxes there.
That's
and
the thing, right? Is that he's so pull happy. He's a little bit kind of Danny Jansen-esque, right? I just don't know because he's going to cost you a lot of money, and I don't know that the Blue Jays are going to be making a big financial commitment to him.
Yeah, I think like that's maybe an area where you would go out and make a trade, right? Like maybe there's a third baseman who becomes available. Like maybe the Rockies are willing to move Ryan McMahon, or it's not the sexiest
I've heard
name.
that one before. I've heard
It's
that
not the
one before.
sexiest name, but like I mean, there's probably enough guys out there that you can find a third baseman. Somebody might come available, and depending on who you're looking at, and there's always surprise moves for sure. So I think that there's enough space for them to do that. I Barger is. I would love him as a right fielder. I think if he could be a full-time right fielder, I think he would end up being
You've
very,
got
very.
you've got your full time right fielder though already.
I
Like
know.
who's
So like maybe he's Barger is the guy that you trade. Maybe he's the piece that ends up being moved.
I just don't know where because he's not playing right field because next year your outfield is Springer because of the contract and he should in theory be a roughly league average hitter, which isn't really what you want from him per se, but he'll be passable. And then you've got Dalton Varsho, who has turned it on of late. He is a 5 WAR player right now, and he will be a productive part of the 2025 Blue Jays. So you're looking for a left fielder. Barger isn't that. He's not rangy enough. He's got the arm for it, but the problem is you don't really need the arm that strong in left field. So, like what's the prognosis? What's the
Yeah, I mean,
what's
I
the
mean, I
equation?
think for me, if I'm looking at what this team needs, obviously they need a hitter. I feel like left field is a nice spot to go out and grab like an Anthony Santander, a Teoscar Hernandez, like somebody like that, right? Like who can kind of come in, probably won't give you a great outfield defense in left, but it'll hit 30 home runs for you, and which would kind of change the equation of the team. And obviously you have Loperfido there as well, and I think Loperfido's acquitted himself better than Barger at this point to kind of be a piece
Yeah,
for next season.
for sure, for sure. So again, like this glut of dudes that they've kind of got going here, like it's what you want them to be doing. You want them
Yeah.
to have this depth because they didn't have this depth before the trade deadline. But I'm just not really sure exactly what that means for the 2025 Blue Jays when they're hunting down a playoff spot.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. They've
And
got the
the
pieces
other guy
there
we
and they're
haven't mentioned
performing.
also, we haven't mentioned Class A, who's also in the high minors, and you figure that he'll get a shot at playing in the big leagues
Yeah.
next year.
And Roden too, right? Like Class A and Roden are kind of the two outfielders that you might point to as pieces that maybe aren't opening day players, but could kind of be like mid-season additions, mid-season call-ups or whatever, right? So it's a good problem to have that all these dudes have played well.
Yeah, just the fact that none of them are really great prospects is what it is.
Yeah. Another dude who has been playing extremely well, and we talked about him a little bit last week, is Bowden Francis. But Bowden Francis, of course, went on to have the best start of his career against the Los Angeles Angels, coming 3 outs away from a no-hitter before giving up a home run to Taylor Ward. What a game. He sets a career high in strikeouts, just dominant all night long. And then he's kind of getting up there in pitch count, and like you could kind of tell like he was running out of gas a little bit. And what were your thoughts on them leaving him in? Like, I mean, I think it's fine. I've seen some pieces, and it'd be really interesting if somebody were to kind of dive into it, like what a no-hitter attempt, or like what pitchers stretching their pitch count to seek a no-hitter, like how that affects them. So, like, I mean, I think it was Spencer Turnbull and Michael Lorenzen were the two who ended up throwing no-hitters and then were absolutely fried for the rest of the season. But I don't think that'll be the case here. But just wondering what your thoughts were on them leaving him in.
Well, it's also so late in the year, right? But I have no issue with them leaving him in because he's chasing history, right? He came within a fraction of an inch of joining Dave Steve, right?
Yeah.
And Taylor Ward takes him yard and finds it in himself to be all hittable, pedestrian stuff, blah 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 blah. And of course we get the sign from Chris Bassett the following game. I have no issue with it. I think Bowden Francis deserved that opportunity. How often do guys get to take a no hitter in the ninth inning? And not to turn this into any kind of anti-analytics and anti-sabermetrics, blah 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 blah. But call it old school, call it what you want. I'm glad they let the guy finish the game. or
Yeah,
attempt to finish the game.
in a season that has been devoid of moments, that was a moment. And it was a really
Absolutely.
good one. And for a dude who seems to be a really good dude, hard worker, kind of has put in the grind of trying to be a major leaguer. I think really, really nice story for him to be able to kind of have that. And like, who knows, like maybe that's his best career start, right? Like it very well might be his best start as a major league pitcher. And, of course it comes on in the middle of this run where he has been absolutely dominant and electric and of course won AL player of the week. And, I think he has like a sub one ERA for his past four starts or whatever it is. And, just really, really awesome to see him succeeding this way. How do you think this affects, like, where are you at with him in terms of locking him into the 2025 rotation?
Well, we had this discussion last week, and then he followed it up with this last outing. My stance doesn't change that. To me, he's a 4 or a 5, probably more of a 5. And there's going to be a bit of a glut, a bit of a mix of guys that they're going to have in that group. But the biggest thing that this changes is the urgency to go out and find a top of the rotation arm to push the top of your rotation down a little bit, slowly kind of moving back or receding, because you have some 4s, you have some 5s, and Yariel Rodriguez, in Bowden Francis, that you have some faith, have some belief in to go out there and have success. Like, these guys are luxuries as a 4, as a 5. And I haven't even mentioned Jake Bloss, who we mentioned briefly beforehand. He's a guy that seems like he'll be in the equation next month. They have options now, and that's something they didn't have to start the season. And it's something that evaporated basically on them after, Wes Parsons gets claimed. Mitch White stinks and he gets claimed. And it's good to have flexibility.
Yeah, they for the amount that the past couple of years have been like, oh, they need to have starting pitching depth, and that's kind of come in the form of like signing Zach Thompson, signing Drew Hutchison, signing Aaron Sanchez. It's nice to have these guys who are able to step up and do the job well. Next year, like you're entering next year with Kevin Gossman, Jose Barrios, Chris Bassett, Yariel Rodriguez, Bowden Francis, Jake Bloss, Alek Manoah will be back. Ricky Tiedemann will be back, right? Like, so there's enough there. Like Adam Macko will be in AAA ideally next year. And, some guys pushing up, like they've got a couple of arms who have like kind of slowly maybe emerged as potential pieces to be like considered far away depth, I think. And yeah, it's interesting. It's awesome to see Bowden kind of be that dude. Do you want to talk about the Taylor Ward comments? Because I think the Bassett moment is really cool. The Ward thing I think is more like it speaks more negatively about the Angels' ability than maybe about Bowden Francis. But
Well, I think it comes off as just salty. And we talked about how it must be miserable being an Angels fan. And Taylor
imagine being
Ward
an Angel.
is probably not having a very fun season. And think, like, he was in the middle of rumors of getting dealt earlier this year.
He
There was
probably
talk of
wanted
him
to get
ending up in
traded so
Pittsburgh.
bad.
He was probably like, I see the light. And
Yeah.
needless to say, he has not left the Los Angeles Angels.
Yeah. I mean, like here's the thing. Like Bowden Francis isn't a stuffist. He isn't an elite arm, right? So I think it's understandable when somebody's like, yeah, it's hittable, because realistically you're in the box and it probably does look hittable compared to some of the better arms in baseball, right? Like I don't think what Taylor Ward said was necessarily wrong. But man, dude, you cannot say that after getting no hit
You
through
just
8 innings. And
yeah,
it's
the
like set like
timing.
15 straight innings. Like what was it? Two hits, 4 hits or whatever, 1 run in 15 straight innings. Like the timing of that is so poorly. And I bet you he would take it back if he could, but like, man, like just tone deaf timing and like, come on, man. Like dude has such a special moment, and I don't think that you need to throw dirt on him and your teammates like that.
Oh yeah, just almost sounds like him saying, I don't know why all these other morons couldn't hit him because I hit him.
Yeah, you didn't hit him until the ninth inning there, buddy. But Yeah, it's certainly one of those moments in a year where you kind of scratch your head a little bit and you're like, like look at what just happened. Like, yeah, it wasn't hittable, obviously, because you guys didn't do it. So I
Pretty much.
remember who was it that traded for Taylor Ward? Was it you or was it me in
I
our
can't remember.
off-season predictions or
I
off-season
think it. I think it.
building?
I think it was me, and I think it was between him and Tyler Anderson, and I called Taylor Ward the luxury option. So, needless to say,
Yeah.
that wasn't the correct take.
Yeah, Taylor Ward has not been having a good season. And like, I mean, I don't know how you could have a good season like amidst the whatever has gone on in LA this year, but man, like
This is really a bash on the Angels episode, isn't
I mean they deserve it. Like they've just been so bad. Like there's no good things going on there. Like
it?
Zach Neto and Logan O'Hoppe have been good, but like man, they are so far away from being like a relevant major league
What a
franchise.
what a sad franchise that is right now,
Yeah.
man. What a sad. It's such a Mike
Save
Trout
save
is
Mike
not going
Trout.
to
Save Mike Trout. Please request a
free
trade,
my
Mike Trout.
man, free my
Please
man.
request a trade. Yes.
Someday, someday, someday.
Okay, one last thing. I mean, this is probably the oldest news on our list here, but I think maybe the most significant news. Joey Votto announced his retirement last Wednesday, and he did it from the Buffalo Bison's parking lot after a game and said he was done, said that he sucked. He said that late in later interviews, he said that like kind of the moment during that game, a coach asked him if he wanted to pinch hit, and he said no, and kind of realized that that was the first time in his life that he's ever turned down an at bat. So he decided to retire, and I think with the Reds being in Toronto at that time and him not making it up for that series, I think there's probably a little bit of a realization there for him that, it probably wasn't going to happen this year. And I think he had a sub 600 OPS in AAA. And I think he was talking to Dan Patrick and he said that like it just wasn't getting easier for him. So, what a career for Joey Votto. And it's unfortunate that it didn't work out, but pretty cool that he gets to spend his entire career as a Cincinnati Red.
Yeah, if I had a nickel for every time a aging legend ended up a Toronto Blue Jay but never ended up making the team, I'd have three nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's strange that it's happened three
Whoa,
times.
four, Deion
Four.
Sanders,
Well, no, there's Dion,
Votto,
there's
Vladdy,
Votto, Vladdy. Who's four?
Johan Santana.
Almost forgot about Johan Santana. Needless to say, this is not the first time this has happened, and it likely won't be the last. But let's take a moment here to wax poetic about Joey Votto and arguably the greatest Canadian hitter of all time. I mean, Larry Walker probably has that title, but Joey Votto is probably not that far behind. Definitely the best eye of any hitter uh, coming out of the north of the 49th parallel. So, I mean, you're the Canadian baseball guy here. Maybe it's probably better if you uh, give Joey Votto his flowers, but I'll just say incredible baseball player, very strange dude, very fun dude. Uh, Obviously, never had the chance to personally meet him, but definitely one of the characters of Major League Baseball will no doubt be missed around the game. And unfortunate he couldn't do it in front of the Blue Jays as a Blue Jay, but nonetheless, cool that he got that opportunity and wishing him all the best in retirement.
Yeah, I mean, like one of the cooler baseball players. I think he's probably underappreciated in his prime. Like if he were to play today, he would be, very, very well appreciated based on the way that he got on base, the way that he walked, the way that he kind of tapped into his power. He was a solid defender. He won a Gold Glove. He was, six-time All-Star, MVP, like one of the coolest Canadian stories in a long time. And I mean, he's coming up a catcher. And like, I mean, if you read Jonathan Mayo's book where the Reds were like secretly recruit or secretly scouting him because they didn't want anybody else to figure out who he was, and then they like snagged him right before the Yankees, and he ends up in Cincinnati where he goes on to be probably a Hall of Fame level player. And I think one of the things with him that's really interesting too is that like he started to kind of fall off a little bit in like the 2019 2020, and then he kind of had that resurgence in 2021 where he hit 36 homers, had a 938 OPS. So like I mean he already went down that road of like having his performance decline and then being able to figure it out again, which I think is a really, really awesome story. Just a really cool career. I mean, like you mentioned, like he's probably the third best Canadian ever behind Ferguson Jenkins and Larry Walker. He is a Hall of Famer to me. I think he should get in. I don't think that there's really maybe he's not going to be a first ballot guy because he, isn't like one of these 80, 90 war dudes. I think he ended up with like around 65. He's got the MVP. He led the NL in OBP. I think it was 7 different times. So I think as far as like a modern baseball player goes, he's like a perfect embodiment of a modern type player who kind of maybe didn't quite change the game, but he's one of these players that really is important to the story of Canadian baseball and will go down as such, I believe.
Yeah, listen, if Cooperstown is 75-25, yes, no, St. Mary's, Ontario, will no doubt be calling sooner than later.
Yeah, he will be a first ballot Canadian baseball Hall of Famer. I think there's no questioning that. So that'll be a fun ceremony to see when he goes in there. I'm sure his speech will be iconic for sure. Like he's,
Just as
the
eccentric as just
personality
as
stuff.
eccentric as exactly.
Yeah, like the moments of his career, I think really, really just kind of add to it. Like he's just an awesome character. And, Joey Votto bangs. Joey Votto
He
bangs
still bangs,
forever.
still
Still
bangs.
bangs. And he always will. Well, I think that is going to do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are going to run. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe and like buttons. If you're listening on the audio medium of your choice, make sure to follow and review. You can follow us all on Twitter. The pod is at BEV_pod. I am at Worden_Zach, and Jori is at J Negin-Shecter. Thanks so much for listening.